Shadows of Easter. Easter had always been a time of joy and celebration, a time for families to come together and rejoice in the promise of renewal and rebirth. But this Easter was different. This Easter brought with it a darkness that would forever haunt my dreams. It began innocently enough: a weekend getaway to a remote cabin in the woods, a chance to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and immerse myself in the tranquility of nature. The cabin was quaint and cozy, nestled among towering pine trees and overlooking a serene lake. But as night fell and the shadows lengthened, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me like a shroud. I tried to push aside my fears, to focus on the warmth of the fire crackling in the hearth and the laughter of my friends as we shared stories and toasted marshmallows. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the darkness beyond the cabin walls. As the night wore on, the air grew thick with tension, each creak of the floorboards and rustle of the wind sending shivers down my spine. And then, just as I was on the verge of drifting off to sleep, I heard the sound of footsteps outside, faint and indistinct, like the whisper of a ghost. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest, straining to make out the source of the noise. But all I could see was darkness, stretching out before me like a bottomless pit. I called out to my friends, but they were already asleep, lost in dreams that were far removed from the nightmare that was unfolding around us. With a sense of dread, I rose from bed and made my way to the window, peering out into the night. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest floor, and for a moment I thought I saw something moving among the trees, a shapeless mass, dark and foreboding. I blinked, and it was gone, vanished into the darkness as if it had never been there at all. But the feeling of unease lingered, festering like a wound that refused to heal. I returned to bed, but sleep eluded me, my mind racing with thoughts of what lurked beyond the safety of the cabin walls. As the hours passed, the darkness seemed to press in around us, suffocating and oppressive. I could hear my friends tossing and turning in their sleep, their dreams troubled by the same sense of foreboding that plagued me. And then, just as I was on the verge of succumbing to exhaustion, I heard the sound of scratching at the door, faint and muffled, but unmistakable. I froze, my blood running cold as the scratching grew louder, more insistent. I wanted to scream, to wake my friends and flee into the night, but fear held me rooted to the spot, paralyzing me with its icy grip. And then, with a suddenness that took my breath away, the scratching stopped, replaced by a deafening silence that seemed to stretch on for eternity. I waited, holding my breath, but there was nothing, no sound, no movement, nothing but the oppressive weight of the darkness that surrounded us. I lay awake for what felt like hours, my mind racing with thoughts of what lay beyond the cabin door. Was it a wild animal, drawn by the scent of our food, or something far more sinister, lurking in the shadows, waiting to claim us as its own? At last, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, I rose from bed and crept to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. With trembling hands, I reached out and pulled it open, revealing the darkness that lay beyond. And there, standing on the threshold, was a figure cloaked in shadow, its eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. I wanted to scream, to run, but fear held me rooted to the spot as the figure stepped forward into the cabin, its presence filling the room with a palpable sense of dread. I could hear my friends stirring behind me, their sleep disturbed by the intruder in our midst. But as they awoke and saw the figure standing before them, their screams echoed through the cabin, drowning out the sound of my own terror. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, leaving behind nothing but a lingering sense of unease and the shadows that seemed to dance in its wake. We fled from the cabin that night, leaving behind the darkness that had consumed us and vowing never to return. But as I look back on that fateful Easter, I can't shake the feeling that the shadows that haunted us that night were more than just a figment of our imagination, that they were a warning, a reminder of the darkness that lurks within us all, waiting to be unleashed. As we stumbled out into the cold night air, the darkness seemed to cling to us like a tangible weight, pressing down on our shoulders and filling our lungs with a suffocating sense of dread. We ran blindly through the forest, our hearts pounding in our chests, our minds consumed by fear. But no matter how fast we ran, the shadows seemed to follow, twisting and writhing in the moonlight as if they were alive. I could hear my friends screaming behind me, their voices echoing through the trees like a chorus of lost souls, but I dared not look back, for fear of what I might see. At last, we reached the edge of the forest, our breath coming in ragged gasps, as we stumbled into a clearing bathed in moonlight. We collapsed onto the ground, our bodies trembling with exhaustion and terror, as we tried to make sense of the nightmare that had engulfed us. But even as we caught our breath, we could feel the darkness closing in around us, its tendrils reaching out to ensnare us once more. We knew then that we could never truly escape the shadows that had haunted us that night, that they would follow us wherever we went, lurking in the corners of our minds and waiting to claim us as their own. And so, we fled into the night, leaving behind the cabin and the forest and the darkness that had consumed us. But as I look back on that fateful Easter, I know that the shadows of that night will haunt me forevermore, a reminder of the darkness that lurks within us all, waiting to be unleashed. In the days that followed, we tried to bury the memories of that night deep within us, to return to the normalcy of our lives before the darkness. We spoke little of what had happened, each of us quietly nursing our wounds and the terror that refused to fade with the light of day. Yet, the more we tried to forget, the more vivid the memories became. Nights were the worst. The darkness seemed to press against the windows, whispering secrets and threats in a language we felt in our bones, but could not understand. Sleep became a battleground, where shadows danced in the corners of our rooms, and silence was filled with the echoes of our own racing hearts. It wasn't long before the cracks began to show. Jason was the first to break. He claimed he could see the shadows moving in broad daylight, lurking behind stranger smiles, and following him down busy streets. We tried to help him, to convince him it was just the stress, the aftermath of our shared trauma, but our words sounded hollow, even to our own ears. Eventually, Jason moved away, seeking peace in new surroundings, but the distance did little to quell the darkness that had rooted within him. Emily was next. She threw herself into her work, an attempt to drown out the whispers that crept into her thoughts during quiet moments. But the harder she fought to ignore them, the louder they became. She became a shell of her former self, jumping at shadows and flinching from the touch of those she loved. We watched helplessly as the vibrant, laughing girl we knew retreated into a fortress of her own making, leaving us on the outside, unable to reach her. I, too, felt the pull of the darkness, a siren call that beckoned me back to the forest, to the cabin where our nightmare had begun. It promised answers, an end to the fear. If only I dared to face it. I resisted, knowing that to succumb would be to lose myself entirely, but the temptation lingered, a constant companion to my every thought. In a desperate bid for closure, we gathered once more, the remaining few, on the anniversary of that fateful night. We returned to the forest, not to the cabin, but to the clearing where we had made our stand. The moon was full, casting its silver light over the trees, bathing everything in an ethereal glow that seemed almost comforting, in stark contrast to the terror that once ruled our hearts. We stood in silence, each lost in our own memories, until Sarah, always the bravest among us, stepped forward. She spoke of forgiveness, of letting go of the fear that had held us captive and embracing the darkness as a part of who we were now. It was not about forgetting, she said, but about accepting and moving forward. One by one, we shared our stories, our fears, and our hopes for the future. We spoke of Jason and Emily, of the paths we had walked since that night, and of the strength we found in each other. And as we spoke, the shadows seemed to recede, the whispers to quieten, until all that was left was the peace of the night and the warmth of our bond. We left the forest that night with lighter hearts, knowing that, while the darkness might never fully leave us, it no longer had the power to consume us. The shadows of that Easter night would forever be a part of our story, but they would no longer define us. As I look back now, years removed from the terror and the turmoil, I see not just the darkness, but the light that came from it, the growth, the resilience, and the unbreakable bond forged in the heart of fear. It is a reminder, not just of what we faced, but of what we overcame, a testament to the strength within us all, waiting to be unleashed. Shadow at Easter. Easter was supposed to symbolize rebirth and joy, but for me, it became a gateway to an unspeakable horror. Our story begins in a small, seemingly peaceful town where the arrival of spring was celebrated with an annual Easter egg hunt at the local church. The town was abuzz with excitement, children and adults alike looking forward to a day filled with fun and laughter. However, this year was different. A shadow loomed over the festivities, a foreboding presence that only I seemed to notice. The day before Easter, as I volunteered to set up the event, I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were being watched. The ancient oak trees surrounding the church, usually comforting in their stoic presence, now appeared to whisper secrets as the wind rustled through their branches. I told myself it was just the jitters, a byproduct of my overactive imagination. Easter morning arrived, bathed in the soft light of dawn. The town's children, adorned in their Sunday best, dashed about with baskets in hand, their laughter a melodious backdrop to the serene setting, yet the unease within me grew. It was then I first saw it, a fleeting shadow, darting between the trees, too swift to be natural. I blinked, and it was gone. As the egg hunt drew to a close, I decided to investigate. Drawn to the woods that bordered the church, I ventured deeper than I ever had before. The air grew colder, the cheerful sounds of the celebration distant now. That's when the whispers began, soft and insidious, calling my name. My heart raced as I realized the whispers emanated from all around me, yet I could see no one. I stumbled upon a clearing I had never seen before, in the center of which stood an ancient, gnarled tree, its branches casting a sinister shadow despite the morning sun. At its base, a collection of Easter eggs, unlike any I had seen, painted in hues of black and red, adorned with symbols that made my skin crawl. It was an altar of sorts, dedicated to something unspoken, a sinister homage to a forgotten ritual. The whispers grew louder, more demanding. Panic set in. I turned to flee, only to find the shadow blocking my path. It was no longer fleeting but solid, taking the form of a hooded figure, its features obscured by darkness. Its presence was suffocating, a void of despair that threatened to drown me. "Why do you disturb my sacred ground?" it hissed, a voice like the crackling of dry leaves. I tried to speak, to plead, but words failed me. The figure advanced, and as it did, the whispers coalesced into a singular, intelligible voice, promising untold horrors for my trespass. In that moment of terror, a memory surfaced, the legend of the Shadow of Easter, a tale told to frighten children of a spirit that guarded the boundary between the living and the dead, angered by those who dared to disturb its slumber. With every ounce of bravery I could muster, I spoke, my voice a mere whisper. I meant no harm. I seek only to protect the joy of Easter, not to desecrate sacred ground. The figure halted, as if considering my words. The oppressive air began to lift, the whispers fading into silence. The shadow receded, melting back into the trees, leaving behind only the chilling memory of its presence. I fled the clearing, not stopping until I had returned to the safety of the church grounds. The celebration had ended, families beginning to depart, oblivious to the nightmare that had unfolded just beyond their reach. I never spoke of my encounter, fearing disbelief or worse, but I knew the truth. The shadow of Easter was real, a guardian of ancient and dark secrets that lay hidden beneath the veneer of our quaint traditions. From that day forward, Easter was never the same for me. Each year, as the town celebrates, I watch the woods, half expecting to see the shadow once again. It serves as a reminder that some mysteries are best left undiscovered, for the truths they conceal might be the very horrors we seek to avoid. And so, the shadow at Easter remains a cautionary tale of curiosity and the ancient, unseen forces that govern our world, lying in wait for the next unwitting soul to wander too close to the edge of darkness. Unbeknownst to the townsfolk, my encounter with the shadow had irrevocably changed something within the fabric of our reality. In the weeks following Easter, a palpable sense of dread settled over the town. Pets went missing, strange symbols appeared on the ancient oaks, and whispers plagued the dreams of the innocent. I knew these were not mere coincidences. They were warnings, omens of a darker truth that lay buried beneath our feet. I began to research, delving into the town's archives, seeking any mention of the shadow or the ancient rituals that might have birthed such a creature. I discovered tales of old, long forgotten by time, of a cult that worshipped the dark aspects of rebirth and renewal, of which the shadow was a guardian. This cult had been driven out, their practices deemed too sinister for the light of day, but their legacy lingered, a curse upon the land. As Easter approached once again, I felt a responsibility to confront the shadow, to put an end to the cycle of fear. Armed with my newfound knowledge and a heart heavy with determination, I returned to the clearing on the eve of Easter. I brought with me an offering, a symbol of peace and a plea for understanding. I did not wish to banish the shadow, but to reconcile with it, to acknowledge its place in the balance between light and darkness. The night was moonless, the darkness complete, as I stepped into the clearing. The air was electric with anticipation, the ancient trees standing sentinel over the silent ground. I placed my offering at its base, and I spoke into the darkness, my words a mixture of apology and appeal. For a long time, there was silence. Then, the whispers returned, this time less menacing, more curious. The shadow materialized, its form less menacing, a mere silhouette against the night. "Why do you return, child of light?" it asked, its voice a low murmur. "I seek to understand," I replied, "to find harmony between your world and mine. We are not enemies, but kin, bound by the cycle of life and death, of rebirth and decay." The shadow considered this, its form shifting, pondering. "For centuries, I have guarded the threshold, keeping the balance. Yet, you are the first to seek understanding rather than conquest." I waited, breath held, as the shadow seemed to commune with the unseen forces that governed its existence. Finally, it spoke. "There can be peace between our realms, but the pact must be renewed, the balance respected. You must be the bridge, the keeper of the covenant." I agreed without hesitation. Understanding the weight of the responsibility was accepting. The shadow extended a tendril of darkness towards me, and I felt a cold, tingling sensation as it touched my forehead. Visions of the past and future flashed before my eyes, the history of the land, and the potential for harmony or destruction. When the vision ended, I was alone once more, the shadow gone, leaving behind a sense of solemn duty. I knew my life had changed forever, that I was now the guardian of a secret that would protect the town and ensure the Shadow's legacy was neither forgotten nor maligned. As the years passed, I kept the covenant, performing the ancient rituals that kept the balance, educating those who would listen about the importance of respecting the old ways. The town flourished, the sinister events of the past fading into memory, a testament to the power of understanding and respect. The Shadow at Easter had become a guardian not just of the threshold between life and death, but of the town itself, a reminder that darkness and light exist in equilibrium, each necessary for the other's existence. And as long as the covenant remained, peace would reign, the Shadow a silent protector, watching over us all. The peace that followed was delicate, maintained by the unspoken agreement between me and the unseen forces that once threatened to engulf our town in darkness. As the guardian of the covenant, my life became a series of rituals and secrets, a dance on the thin line that separates the mundane from the mystical. The town, for its part, thrived under this unacknowledged protection, its people blissfully unaware of the darkness that lurked just beyond their perception. However, peace is often a prelude to storm, and in the world of shadows, complacency is a sin. It was during an unseasonably warm spring, several years after my pact with the Shadow, that I first noticed the signs of unrest. A series of unexplainable events began to unfold, each more disturbing than the last. Crops withered overnight, livestock were found mutilated in fields, and a thick fog enveloped the town 4 days, chilling to the bone and impenetrable to the midday sun. I recognized these as warnings, a call to action from the covenant I had sworn to uphold. The balance was shifting, disturbed by a force I had not anticipated. I returned to the ancient tree, the site of my pact with the Shadow, under the cover of night, seeking guidance or perhaps a warning of what was to come. The clearing was different that night, the air charged with a palpable sense of anticipation. The tree itself seemed to writhe in the moonlight, its branches twisting in silent agony. As I approached, the ground beneath my feet trembled, and the whispers began, though they were not the whispers I had come to know. These were screams, cries of pain and anger that clawed at the edges of my mind. "Who disturbs the balance?" I called into the night, my voice steady despite the fear that knotted my stomach. "Balance," a voice hissed, a new voice, one filled with malice and contempt. "The balance is broken, human. Your pact has been violated." A chill ran down my spine as I realized the implications of the voice's words. Had I failed in my duties? Had I unwittingly allowed the covenant to be broken? I demanded answers, but the voice only laughed, a sound that echoed through the clearing like the tolling of a death knell. In the days that followed, the town fell into chaos. The darkness that we had kept at bay for so long now encroached upon us with relentless fury. It became clear that a new entity had entered the fray, one not bound by the old agreements, and it sought to undermine the balance for its own inscrutable purposes. Desperate, I sought the Shadow, hoping to find in it an ally against this new threat. To my relief, it appeared to me once more, though its form was strained, as if it battled against the encroaching darkness. "The covenant is old, and the world has changed," it whispered, its voice a mere echo of what it once was. "The entity you face is born of modern fears, a darkness fed by neglect and ignorance. It seeks not balance, but dominion." Understanding dawned on me then, a realization that the battle we faced was not just against an external darkness, but against the shadow within each of us, the part that turns away from what we do not wish to see. Together, the Shadow and I forged a new plan, one that would require the town to confront its own darkness, to acknowledge and integrate it rather than deny its existence. It was a gamble, for confronting one's shadow is no small task, but it was the only way to restore the balance and ensure the survival of both our worlds. The night of the new pact was unlike any before. The townspeople, driven by desperation and guided by the few of us who had glimpsed the truth, gathered in the clearing. There, surrounded by the encroaching darkness, we performed a new ritual, one of acceptance and understanding. As our voices rose in unison, a light began to shine within the darkness, a beacon of hope in the face of despair. The entity, starved of the fear and neglect it fed upon, withered before us, dissolving into the night from which it had come. In the aftermath, the town was forever changed. No longer could we live in blissful ignorance of the darkness that dwelled at the edges of our reality. We had confronted it, acknowledged it, and in doing so, we had diminished its power over us. The shadow, too, was transformed by the ordeal. No longer just a guardian of the threshold, it became a symbol of the balance we must all maintain between light and dark, a reminder that one cannot exist without the other. And as for me, I continue my role as the keeper of the covenant, though now with a deeper understanding of the true nature of the balance. The Easter shadow, once a source of fear, is now a symbol of our town's resilience, a testament to the power of unity in the face of darkness. As the years pass and new generations rise, the story of the Easter shadow will be told and retold, a legend of how we faced the darkness and emerged stronger, bound together by the light and shadow within us all.